now be recorded.
Order concerning imposition on strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. Meetings in the town of Upton are being conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. Today we have several items on the agenda. We'll start as always with public comment, approving meeting minutes. We have a Class 2 hearing on 138 Milford Street. We're going to go over the draft annual town meeting warrant. We're going to talk about executing a couple of agreements and then have a discussion about reopening the annual town meeting warrant and town manager updates. So with that, I will open the floor up to any public comment on any topic. Okay, approval of meeting minutes from February 16th. Those look fine to me. Maureen's muted.
Maureen, you're muted.
They're all right with me.
They look fine with me. There was just one question I had. I sent it over to Sandy. I think it's pretty easy to resolve, so I'm good with it as long as you're okay with the clarification.
And what was the clarification?
There were just two things. On the Class 2 license, they had made mention that I had voted to table it till the next meeting. So I was recused from that discussion, so I shouldn't be on that particular vote. So just wanted to make sure we resolved that. And then earlier in there, it said February 2nd. I think it should have said March 2nd. So that was the only other question I had with regard to the minutes.
Good. I'll take a motion.
I move that we approve the meeting minutes of February 16th. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
I second the motion. Stephen Metellian, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action. Next, we have the continued 138 Milford Street Class 2 hearing. So I think, Steve, you'll recuse yourself and be back in just a minute.
Yes, I will recuse myself. Thank you.
Okay, so I think on this one we had several questions. I think we got an answer that the number of spaces that has been designated in the past was 25 spaces. So now that we have that information as a standard for this location, I don't have any other questions. Maureen, I don't know if you have any other questions.
No, I got the information from the building department and the zoning board meetings minutes stating that there were 25 issues before.
Great. I will take a motion unless I see Mr. Corner on the phone. If there's anything you'd like to say, certainly. And here, otherwise, go ahead and do this application.
Yeah, I think we're all set.
Okay, great.
I move that we approve the Class 2 license for 138 Milford Street for the Wayland Foreign Motors LLC. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Majority action. And thank you, Mr. Cornu, for your patience on this. I know it's taken this is our third meeting where we've discussed this. We had some technical questions. They weren't specific to anything regarding your license application. So we appreciate you bearing with us as we work some of these administrative issues out.
Okay. Well, hey, thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you, sir. Next up, we have the draft annual meeting warrant. So we have a total of 27 articles. You guys ready for this?
Yep.
All right.
Yes, I am.
So the question I have is, do we want to, typically I think what we do, and this is for discussion, given that there's a lot here, we can go to each one and either just say, okay, Article 3, any discussion, and if we all agree, then we can just make a motion to include the article as written. We can just say, okay, we've reviewed the warrants. These are the 3 articles we have questions on. Let's just talk about those. I'm not sure so I open it up to that as a second option. And any other approach that you guys can think of that you want to discuss, I'm happy to discuss what you think makes the most sense.
I've reviewed the articles as presented. I wouldn't have a problem making a motion to accept them.
I like to just go through them. Obviously, there's some that are rather procedural. I think the first 2 or 3 probably are, so we can kind of fast forward through those. But I do have some questions, or I think it's a good time for us to at least bring some, if we just breeze through this warrant quickly, there may be people listening in, and I think people are going to want to have, at least familiarize themselves, or if we have some questions we can work through in this venue. I think it would be helpful to do that.
Love it. Let's definitely do that. I also know you're right, Steve. We also have the citizens petitions that we want to be able to discuss as well. So we know those will be in here. But just as a preview as well, similar to what we did last year, we will be putting the warrant into the town crier as we did last year. And we'll make sure that is this draft already on the website, or are we planning to put it on? It's already on the website.
That was the question I was going to ask.
Okay. So
Yeah, we posted this on the website. It's on the Board of Selectmen homepage. It's been posted since early February.
Got it. Is there a way for us to put it up in news if we haven't done that, and just sort of make it like the first thing you see when anybody goes to the website instead? Because sometimes it can be hard to pick around and find things.
Yeah, we can pull it up front.
Okay. Awesome. Thank
I
you.
think that's a good idea. If we have a link right at the left-hand side of the home page where it'll be front and center for people to see.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that'll be helpful for people that just want to go there and look at it. So we'll put it in the town crier. We'll get it up on the very front page of the website. And then to your point, Steve, let's go through it and talk about the ones that are not sort of standard procedural stuff here, so that we can at least have a public dialogue about it. So with that, Article 1, pretty straightforward. Article 2, operating budget. Article 3 is water enterprise. Article 4 is wastewater enterprise. Any questions on those, Steve, or discussion?
No, I think those are pretty straightforward.
Okay. And next we have the spending limits.
Derek, just a quick question. Have any of these changed from last year?
No, I was just going to say that these are the same numbers that were presented last year. There's been no changes.
Okay. Looks good to me.
Okay. Next, Article 6 is the access and cable related fund.
And this was actually procedural change that we made last year, correct, Derek? We had accepted and set this up as a separate fund.
Right. So you see how this is laid out. It's very similar to how we have to have separate articles for our enterprise accounts. KP had recommended a year and a half ago that we accept this through town meeting and then present the cable revenues and expenditures, much like we do enterprise, which is why we have this now as an annual article.
Okay. Looks good to me.
All right. And then Article 7 is moving money into the stabilization fund. So I assume you're going to want to talk about this, Steve.
I hate to sound like a broken record, but this is an article I don't like. So I guess I'd just like to go on the record and make it known that given the current financial crisis that the state is in, and I know we're pretty solid in Upton year to date, I just don't think timing-wise, I don't think this is a good time to bring an article like this forward. That's my feeling. So I would be a no on this article.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Derek, do you want to just help us understand the reason for or Kenny, the 436, 497? Where do we come up with that? Where are we relative to the 10% of 2 to 3 months of our operating expenses? Just because I know that's part of the rationale is people talk about the bond rating. If we're going to be doing a significant borrowing, where are we with that target relative to the target of 10%? And then where does this number 436 come from? And how close does that help us get to that target?
Sure. Kenny's here, so I'll defer to him to speak to the technical stuff. But you hit the nail on the head that this number is driven by 2 points. One, to make up for the money that was transferred out of stabilization last year to cover schools, and then so that was about $250,000, and then the remaining is to reach that target 10%. And I would say probably under other circumstances, to Selectman Letarian's point, we probably wouldn't be recommending that the balance to meet that 10% so quickly. But given the fact that there may be the opportunity to have to go out and borrow for the community center, we wanted to be in the best position in order to seek that AAA bond rating. But I'll defer any technical stuff over to Kenny.
Yeah, I just wanted to add and echo what Derek said. As you know, we talked to S&P last fall, and that 10% was very important to them. And that's something that we have to look at. And looking at fiscal year 21, if you recall, the budget was $24,656,796. So that'll get us to almost to the 2.5 million. And as Derek mentioned, essentially we're putting back the 259. It's almost essentially doing that first, putting the 259 back from last year, that general stabilization transfer. So it would have been a lot less. It would have been like a couple 100,000 as opposed to the 436. So I view it's 2 steps. Step 1, putting back the 259, and then step 2, putting in the difference. So don't think that it'll be 400,000 each year. It's a makeup, and then we're putting in the difference. So all we're doing is we're just trying to get to that 10% of the fiscal year 21 budget, because we know the next time we talk to S&P, they're going to calculate that number as they did back in the fall. We were a little short last year, and they did point that out to me and asking me if is that a goal of the town to get to the 10%? And I did assure them that we will do everything possible if we're able to get to the 10%. So that's something that S&P, the bond rate, they're watching.
So a couple of follow-up questions. So one is, if we were to issue a bond for the community center, will we be re-rated prior to that, or do you get rated prior to any borrowing, or how does that work? Because obviously we're saying time is of the essence. So if we're not going to get reevaluated for 5 years, then it's not.
Yeah, so that's correct. So we're re-rated. There's a credit report. So there's the same process that we went through in the fall. We'll talk to S&P. There'll be multiple questions, multiple financial questions, and that will be one of the questions. Did we meet the 10% goal of the stabilization account? So that'll definitely be a question.
And then my follow-up to that is, if we get to that 10%, we move to a AAA bond rating. Are we confident that this will get us there? And if it does, how much are we expecting to save on whatever the number of borrowing would be?
I can take that. So it depends on the economy. I mean, at the time in the fall when we talked to S&P, nobody was getting a bond rating increase. Nobody was being upgraded. So we have to look at what the economy looks like the next time we talk to them. maybe by that time, they'll definitely want to see how did we make, as far as progress with the budget and how we made it onto the other side. Because during our meeting, they did mention that many times. They're interested to see how the town will do during the pandemic and how we'll make it onto the other side. Will we be able to get through this without tapping our reserves? So that's something that that we'll look at. We're hopeful for an upgrade the next time we talk to them. No, there's no guarantees. We're definitely I feel we're doing all the right things. I think we need to be persistent. I think that will come. That day will come for an upgrade. But there's no guarantees the next time we talk to them, because it'll depend on the economy and depending if they're giving any upgrades to any community.
So the final piece of that equation is the rate benefit and the impact of that rate benefit on how much we end up paying for the debt.
Well, as you know, last fall there was a rate of 1.5. As an average. We've been seeing some. The rate has been increasing. I would say. Last year, maybe if we did have the AAA, we could have saved maybe 25 basis points or up to 25 basis points with that the AAA. We probably would have received more. We could have received more bids, and that's the whole thing with being a AAA. You could receive more bids. Just it's the credit worthiness of the town. So the AAA that's the top. It doesn't get better than that. So that's something that a lot of communities, they strive for. That's definitely their goal.
And then what's the estimate of what 25 basis points? For folks that don't know, that's 0.25 of a percentage. That's just jargon that people use for 1/4 of 1% is 0.25 or 25 basis points. So what's a 25 basis point savings on just estimate $10 million of borrow?
I remember when we were looking at last year when we were looking at the town hall and the water bonds. As you know, we saved, I believe it was like about $450,000. We could have saved anywhere, up to, 50 to 100,000, depending on the bids. There could have been, additional savings, but it puts us in a great position to be in that AAA bond rating. That's something that will definitely can only help us, but to put it that way.
All right. So, do we have a calculator that will tell us or answer that question? We don't have to answer it now, but it's clearly that's the crux of the matter, right? If we're saying we're going to put away $400 and call it $40,000 to save 25 basis points on a $10 million loan or whatever it is, then I want to know, is that saving us $20 or is it saving us 50,000 or 500,000 or what? I'm sure it's not 500,000, but I'm sure it's a significant enough number. But
I'm going to just run an estimate just so I can see
just the order of magnitude, right?
Just as a ballpark.
While we're along that same vein, there's a few. This is a little bit complex, because I feel like we do also have that $250,000 in capital stabilization that's really just forgotten about, and it's not counting towards our stabilization number. So we have right now, I believe it's $2 million in stabilization and $250,000 in capital stabilization. So with this, if you take those numbers and join them together, last year we were at 10% when we went to get requalified. If you take that 250 and factor it in, we'll be significantly higher than 10%. So, we can achieve.
So Steve, let's answer one question at a time, please. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but let's get the answer on the savings, and then we'll get to the calculation of the 10% and if it includes things that aren't in stabilization or not.
Okay. So I'm just running some numbers through. So let's just say 2% on a $10 million bond or general obligation bond for let's say 25 years. At 2%, we're looking at $2.6 million in interest over the 25 years. And if let's say we went up to a 2.5, that would be about 3.2 million. So, it's a savings about $650,000 dollars. But let me try the 2.25.
Were you going up 50 basis points or 25 basis points?
That was 50, just to kind of give you a 0.50 spread. But I'm going to give you a 0.25 now. Let's see.
I'm going to guess it's around 300,000 to save.
Yeah.
That would have been my guess.
Yeah, about 325,000.
See, that's the businessman in you, Steve. All right, awesome. That's exactly what we wanted to know. So thank you for that, Kenny. That's great. So Steve raises a great point, and I don't want to restate it on your behalf, but I think it was basically, the 10% number in stabilization. Would that include these other accounts that Steve is referring to, or is it just specifically in the stabilization account?
So actually, the bond rating, they view the general stabilization account, they view that as the rainy day fund. So that can be used for any municipal purpose. Like the capital project stabilization account, it's really earmarked just for capital type of purchases. So it's really restricted for just those uses. So when they look at this, when they look at our reserves, they look at the general stabilization because we can use that for any type of purpose. Let's say, for example, there's a snow and ice deficit or there's an emergency in the town. That can be used for any type of purpose. So they really look at the general stabilization account as being the like the rainy day fund, and it can be used for any municipal purpose. So there's a distinction, there's a difference.
Yeah, great. Does that help, Steve? Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, it's just kind of my point is that 250 is totally lost. We get no credit for it. It doesn't do anything for us. It's just kind of hanging around in cyberspace. That money, if it was sitting in stabilization, you could still use it if you had a capital project. You could use it for that because, again, it's a rainy day fund. You can use it for anything. Where right now, there's no real scenario where we would have a capital project that would creep up in an event where we either couldn't budget for it or couldn't pay for it out of free cash, or we couldn't pay for it out of stabilization. You know what I'm saying? There's really, it's not earning us any value. We're getting no value for that 250.
Yeah, I see the point. What's the intent of that capital stabilization fund? When's the last time we used it? What scenario would we use it in if we haven't?
We haven't used that. I don't recall the last time we used that fund. It's been a while. It can be used for a capital purpose. I mean, the last few years we've used free cash. The capital stabilization, it's another funding source. If we need to use that, as far as if you want to use that for seed money for a project, as you know, we do have a lot of capital needs, in the town. It's just we've used free cash, in the past because it's available. But it's another option. And that's exactly what S&P likes to see. We have many options. We can use free cash. We can use the capital stabilization account. And it's another funding source. And we can use that, the next time. But we don't have to. It's not restricted. But it's another option.
Is that money that could potentially be used for something, for example, like an ambulance? Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, like we could pay cash, to purchase an ambulance. We could use that 250. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, go ahead, Derek.
I just wanted to add that a lot of municipalities use the capital stabilization accounts as a way to build up additional reserves. So what we haven't done, at least in my time here, we haven't continued to build up that account. So a lot of communities do. They would say put in $100,000 every year. And over a 10-year period, they built up $1 million. And so when they have a major project like a library construction project, they could use that $1 million to offset the total cost. So I think we look at ours, because ours is so small, there's not a lot of money in there. It really hasn't provided any value. But it's really for kind of a long-term savings account, which I think we haven't taken advantage of. And quite frankly, maybe part of it is because we didn't have a policy up until this past summer to really think about how we want to reappropriate our free cash every year to build towards some long-term savings for big capital projects down the road.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's the key thing, right? To have just dormant money sitting there, it's one thing to have a rainy day fund, but to have $250,000 kind of sitting what I'd call off to the side, we need to be thoughtful around how and when we would use that in a scenario that's different than just using a stabilization fund, and whether it's to put towards defray some of the costs of the community center to reduce the impact to taxpayers by using it toward a community center, or using it in earmarking it for an ambulance in the fall, or earmarking it for some other future capital project. That's fine, but we should have some intent around it. So anything else, Steve or Maureen, on this article?
I guess only the last thing I would just say, I think in the past, Kenny, this is just something, if you could forward it to us, the lending government center used to always send out a kind of a report of loans that have been made for municipalities and for how many dollars those borrowings were, what the credit rating was for those municipalities, and what percentage rate they were allotted for that. So it's kind of a report. I saw it probably, maybe every year and a half or so I would see that report. It's kind of helpful because I think it gives us an idea. Now we can really put, again, Brett, as you had mentioned, we want to look and see what those numbers look like. And I'm all about saving money. I just don't want to see 250 swinging out in the breeze that's not really doing anything for us, not fulfilling that 10%. And again, we've bought plenty of high-end fire apparatus, and we paid for it with some monies out of free cash, and the rest of it we really just make a payment on. So I just think that'd be good to be able to see those numbers, see what we may be able to save. So other than that, no, nothing else.
Great. No, I love it. Just seeing it seeing some real world examples is always going to help us do a reality check on what we're sort of theorizing about. So awesome. It looks like 8 is the normal chapter 90. 9 is our funding of roads that we do annually. That number this year is 562,380. I know we had a conversation about this last year. I think we typically do, similar to stabilization, but we should open the floor to any feedback, Maureen or Steve, on this number.
I think Dennis said something about it being towards the end of all the road projects, and then the rest from year to year after that should be the maintenance of roads, correct? Is that what he told us at the last meeting?
I'm not exactly sure what that's referring to. So I can't say for sure. Clearly we're making a lot of progress on the roads. Everybody can see and feel that. I know that he was going to have a roads review done. Is that what you mean? So he's going to spend, after this year of investment, he's going to have a road review done for all the roads to do an inventory and see where we are and where we might want to go next. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Gotcha. Yep. So that was my understanding, Steve.
Yes, I think that's what you're referring to, Maureen. He was talking about that, the 562 in addition to the $325 odd that we get from the state. And I think he's planning on doing that asphalt credit rating after the TIP project's completed. I think after that asphalt's done out to the Hopkinton town line, I think that's when he's planning on doing it. So we can kind of get a new basis for where we need to be. But the 562 is a carryover number, I believe, from last year. Yeah, I think the only point of discussion on this really last year was just the funding source more than anything else. But it sounds like we're probably going to end up going over some of these articles, with respect to maybe reopening the warrant. So, Kenny, at this point, do you have a gut feeling of how we'll pay for this article?
We're planning that will be under the tax levy, as in previous years.
So you want to do it as a raise and appropriate, not out of free cash?
No, this is this is a raise and appropriate, and we historically have always done that out of raise and appropriate.
Okay. Anything else on that one? If not, we'll go to Article 10, funding snow and ice. I think that's probably pretty straightforward unless someone's got a question about it.
just last minute adjustment to the number, right? We really don't know what that's going to be. We're hoping it's zero, but we don't have any sort of an idea at this point in time. Derek, do you have any updates? I know you said Dennis was pretty close at the end of that, end of his allotment here.
Dennis and I had this conversation yesterday, and we are now trending in the red based upon the last couple big storms that we've had. And he said right now, again, without having looked at the numbers recently, he thinks we're probably somewhere in the red around $30,000. He's hopeful that March will be mostly rain and it won't require much more spending through the snow and ice. One idea we thought about, Kenny and I had a conversation of when we think about funding sources, if it is a small number, like around $30,000, that we fund it through year-end transfers versus having to use free cash. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't change the bottom line of the free cash certification, but it would be a way to use some of the turn back money that we get from the departments. And since I started going back to spring of 2018, Kenny and I, we've implemented a spending freeze usually around mid-March. We did that last year mostly because of the pandemic, and we were able to save significant dollars by requiring departments to seek authorization of any expenditure over $1,000 for the last quarter of the fiscal year. So, you know, by using small strategies like that, we expect to see decent returns this year, and we use some of those returns to cover any small snow and ice deficit.
Okay, thank you. 11A is the community center question, and this is the right in, I mean, we've got the placeholder in here, and I see Mr. Brochu. So, Jim, I know you were just coming from one of your meetings, so if you would like to give us the latest on Article 11A, that would be great. If you want to defer it, we can do that as well, so you have more time.
I'm going to give you just a brief overview of where we are, but again, I would ask to defer it until your next meeting. We are in design development. We received the DD or design development estimate back. Just received that on my computer today at noontime. I forwarded it to committee. I had a meeting just now at 7 o'clock. The committee and quite frankly, the OPM and architect haven't really had a chance to digest the 37 pages of estimate. You know, so we're basically taking this next week. We're going to meet again next Tuesday to discuss the DD estimate, but we're taking this week so everybody can really look at it, digest it, because you know, we want to come at you with correct information, correct number where we are. So we're not ready to do that yet.
Fair enough. Great. Okay, Steve or Maureen, any questions that we think Jim might be able to answer, or just general discussion, knowing that we'll get into more detail next meeting?
I think the only thing I guess I just want to throw out there, first of all, good evening, Jim. Good to see you. And I would just say that with the way this is drafted and from what I'm hearing, you know, just little grumblings I'm hearing out on the street and from residents in town, you know, this is a pretty significant dollar value, significantly higher than what we had proposed back a year and a half back. The other question that, you know, I'm hearing people ask is regarding the water and sewer hookup. We know that sewer does not go past the project. So I think we're going to need to figure out, you know, is that going to be an additional expense on top of this article, or is that going to be contained and be able to accomplish that within the cost of this article? Based on some numbers that I was given when I had raised a question about perhaps bringing sewer up past Brook Street in advance of the Mass DOT TIP project, I was given a number to do that type of a construction project of over $900,000. And a significant portion of that cost is to come across that bridge and get it over onto the VFW and, of course, the municipally owned parking lot. So I just think that's something, kind of as a look ahead, that's something that if you could speak to that next time you come in, that would be great. I think that's, really what I'm really catching a lot of, flack for better word regarding that. Those two issues, really.
Yep. No, understood. And we have all those answers and we have all that figured out and in place, but we will discuss it at your next meeting.
Very good.
Do we know, I saw you nodding your head, Jim, so are you nodding your head that the money for the water and sewer would be included, or that you'd be prepared to answer that question?
Currently it is included in our budget estimate, yes.
Just because if there's, to Steve's point, if there are people out in the community that are working up questions or concerns based on that, anything we can do to allay people's concerns and, bring truth and reality into the conversation and the dialogue out in the community, obviously is going to be advantageous for the goal of getting this community center built.
Absolutely. We are currently drafting and working on a frequently asked question form. I mean, I'm taking, and I've met with many committees and met with many individuals and answered and listened and answered a lot of their questions. But again, we're identifying all those questions and we're putting it in document form where the question is asked and basically the answer to that question. So it's our goal to put that out for public knowledge well before the town meeting. So when people go to the town meeting, we hope that they have the majorities of the answers that they seek.
Awesome. Perfect. Love it. All right. Thank you. Anything else, Maureen and Steve, on this one for now? Awesome. Thanks as always, Jim. We know this is always a ton of work for a project this big. And you have a day job that's also extraordinarily difficult during these times. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
11B is the VFW parking agreement, which we have already discussed. Any questions or comments on that one at this point? 12A is $560,000 that currently is sitting in the Community Preservation Undesignated Fund. And the CPA or CPC was seeking to use that to fund a new playground at the community center. So that will help defray the borrowing costs, which is great. Questions, comments on this one?
And if I could just add, we're currently, again, we're taking the DD estimate, we're extracting what the playground cost is, and we're actually on the agenda to meet with the CPC tomorrow night at 7:30.
Awesome. Every little bit helps. This is really generous. That's great.
Yes.
Questions on that one?
No, I guess I'll wait for the update on 12A, but just getting back to 11B real quick, I didn't get my microphone unmuted in time. At the time when we had that discussion, Maureen and I had some questions about insurance, how the insurance was going to play out with that parking agreement. So do we have an updated draft on that we can review before, before we go to print with this, or before we, finalize these warrant articles?
So right now, as you recall, when we talked about the shared parking agreement, we didn't have the attorneys hadn't taken a look at it yet. And so right now, KP is reviewing it and is going to be working with the VFW attorney. So certainly before we execute this warrant, the board will have a chance to review the parking agreement, make sure it meets everything that we expect of it.
All right.
Ready for 12B. This is Community Preservation Fund transfers that they do every year. Questions on this one? 12C is Community Preservation Committee administrative costs.
Is this article a new article, or did we have the same article last year? I seem to recall it, but it looks like something has changed.
You're
I
talking
may
12
be, the article's been reoccurring. It's an article that you see every year. It's for the administration. It's 5% of the budget.
Okay. And the dollars are the same, Kenny?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Very good.
266, Article 12D is the 267,000 for town hall renovation to fund the debt service for that. Any questions on that one?
This is being moved up from November, I take it? We typically address this in November?
Yeah. That's my understanding. Sorry, Derek.
Yes, that is true. As we decided, Kenny and I thought that it's best to move all of the CPC articles when we can to the annual town meeting. It'll help for future planning purposes as well.
If I could also add,
Please.
so this is the community preservation portion of the debt service. There's also a general fund component, and that's part of the general fund. And this amount that you see here, this is net of the savings. So without the refunding, this would have been $30,000 more. So just to let everybody know, this is net of the savings.
Awesome.
True savings.
There it is. Real dollars and cents, Kenny. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Great.
You're welcome.
Great.
I'm kind of a creature of habit. I really like this article in November. I feel it streamlines this. This meeting is always a little more difficult. There's more to, obviously the budget and the warrant. It's a much longer meeting. So I kind of like this one for November, but I'll defer to Brett and Maureen and see what you think.
Well, this is updating from last November, right? So isn't this catching up, and then we would do it again in this coming November, and then we would be on the regular November schedule thereafter? Is that right, or am I misunderstanding?
This would be the first year we have it in the annual town meeting warrant. And so we would no longer need to have it at the special town meeting.
I got you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Maureen.
No, I agree. I was just going to say that this was to put everything on the annual town meeting so that we wouldn't have to go back at the November town meeting. Helps to close out the budget items. It helps with the tax rate setting. You don't have to worry about having a town meeting before you certify your tax rates. And I think this is the better way to go.
And the idea here is that this potentially could make it so that we would just have no special town meeting, or have a shorter special town meeting, or either one or the other, or what's the intent?
My hope would be that we didn't have any special town meeting. It's a big cost to the town clerk's office. And like I said, you're trying to certify your tax rate, get that all settled and your values and everything, and then you have a town meeting that comes in and that disrupts everything, actually, because you can't do anything until that town meeting is held.
Can we, Derek, put, because this is a whole different discussion that I think we need to have more thoughtfully than just spontaneously, because I think it's an interesting idea and one that we should discuss. Can we make sure we get that onto, either the next or certainly some upcoming agenda, so that we can have a full exploratory discussion around the idea of developing an annual cycle for the town that doesn't require us to have a special town meeting?
So I think in years past, this was always addressed in November because we addressed capital in November. So this was kind of looked at as a capital expenditure. So that's why it was postponed till November each year. The other, I guess my only thought would be this is always paid out of CPC funds. So it really shouldn't affect your tax rate either way. You're only paying for it out of CPC. It has no bearing on free cash. So it really, you can't set the tax rate unless you spend no dollars in November. You can't set the tax rate. But if you had any one singular item, like let's just say you were going to buy a pickup truck, that would in theory change your free cash position, and perhaps, well, I guess depending how you pay for it, maybe your tax rate as well.
Yep. So are you talking? And just to be clear, we're talking about 12C.
Yes. 12E.
A 12D, I think we're talking about.
12D. All right. Sorry, I'm scrolling here. Okay, 12D. So I guess one of the other questions is, if If we move 12D to the fall, are there other ones that we would also logically move to the fall just to sort of keep them clustered together, or really we would just do 12D in isolation if we did that? I guess that's a question for you probably, Steve.
Oh, a question for me, you said?
Are there other articles that you feel like you would also expect to see in the fall that are here, or just 12D? Because there's a bunch of CPC, community fund, conservation fund.
I think the funding sources for the CPC articles, I think, would remain in the springtime.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, that's how we always did it. Those would stay in the spring. It would really be that, that payment was always due. Because again, it's due before the end of the year, I think is the reason that it's in November. So I think timing wise, it was always done that way.
And so just right, because this is starting to come together for me now. So this is the article, because we had this article that had to go in November, is this the article that caused us this past year to have a special town meeting despite the fact that we were in the middle of a pandemic?
That's right.
Gotcha.
Yes, there were two articles I think that we had to address, and this was one of the articles that we had to address in November, or at least it didn't have to be November, but it had to be before. What was the date, Kenny? Was it January 7th that was due or something like that?
So the payment is due in December. I think that's what happened. So the first year when we went out to borrow, we actually went long term, and we had a December payment that was due. So at the time, we just got on that cycle. I've made the recommendation in future years, we should be making this appropriation. This article should be at the annual, because we are budgeting the general fund portion as part of the operating for the general fund. So you're voting on one portion of it and not on the other. So I would make the recommendation, if you're going to do one, you should do both. We should do both the general fund and the community preservation at the same time.
Okay, that helps, because I remember that there was that one article that caused us to have the fall town meeting, and if this was it, then I'd say at least for now, my vote would be to leave it in here for now. Let's have the separate conversation about, do we want to try to in future years, migrate away or simplify the fall town meetings just from a social gathering if we don't need to get everybody together, cost savings, what have you. But for now, I'm fine with leaving it here, just so if there's another wave of COVID, hopefully there's not, that we're not stuck having to have the meeting for this article. Okay, all right, thank you. Anything else on that one? Next, we've got 12E, which is the open space reserve account. '13 is conservation fund. 14 is bylaw review. Any questions on this one? Anything on 15? So I'll let Steve and Maureen scroll through and see. I'll speak up if I see one, but let me know if you guys get to one that you want to talk about, because there's a bunch in here that are administrative.
It was really the one that kind of raised my ears a little bit, was the one regarding signage in the Upton Center Business District.
Which number, please?
Well, I found it earlier. I think it's 17.
19.
I'm sorry. I don't have my reading glasses on, so I guess it would be
19, I think is what they're saying.
19.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to?
So my question really was a little bit better, just to kind of understand, what are we trying to achieve by that? Are we trying to make it mandatory that businesses install signage? Are we trying to standardize signage? I just don't want to, when you see a lot of bylaw changes like this or zoning changes, I don't want us as a board, or we as a town, or we as leadership, to look like we're being heavy-handed, especially when we're so fragile. Small business is so fragile in this town. So I really don't want to put any additional burden from a financial standpoint, on small business operating in the business district. That was the only thing that I wanted to raise the question is, what are we looking to achieve by this?
Great. Go ahead, Derek.
So, so this is being sponsored by the Economic Development Committee. What they're trying to achieve here is that when town meeting voted to create a new zoning district, now known as the Upton Center Business District, they in essence created a new zone in town. But what they failed to realize is that the zoning bylaw, which is what this Article 19 is referencing, did not include the new Upton Center Business District. So under the way the zoning bylaw is written right now, there are no rules or regulations as it relates to signs for that Upton Center Business District. So what they're trying to propose here is that we just insert the new zone of the Upton Center Business District already in the current signage bylaw next to commercial and industrial districts.
Does that answer your question, Steve? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Yes, it does and it doesn't. It doesn't give me exactly what are we looking for, and it's exactly what type of signage. Is this something that's going to be enforced by the planning board, or who would have enforcement over something like this?
It doesn't change the existing sign bylaw. So whatever the process is today, and I don't know, I'd have to check with Pat Roach, to erect signs in town, it would follow the same process. It would go in front of the ZBA or the planning board to get a permit. And it does this, what's being proposed in Article 19, it does not alter the types of signs and the usage of signs. The only thing this article is doing is including the new zoning district already in the existing sign bylaw. Right now it's silent.
But just to be clear, Stephen, maybe this is where, so when a new zoning district got created for town center, right? Prior to that, these bylaws applied to signs in that zone. Then they changed the zoning district and created a special zone for the center of town. But when they did that, they failed to add that zone and sign restrictions or regulations to the existing zoning bylaw. So now all they're doing is saying, so right now there's no sign restrictions in town because of the error that was made when we put in the zoning district, because we forgot to add that to the zoning bylaw to have the sign regulations there. So this is basically fixing that administrative error, not changing any of the sign restrictions. Maybe that's not any clearer than what Derek said.
Okay. I guess I get it, but my thinking again would just be that if you have a sign bylaw, it would occur within the whole town. So when I see that it's, earmarked for the Upton Center Business District, I would just assuming that there's some different signage requirements for that district. But if you're telling me that this is the same exact signage requirements as townwide, then I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, this is no change to the types of signs that you can put up at your building at all, or anybody else in town center.
Yeah. Again, I just don't want to create something where all of a sudden the country super or the pizza shop or the liquor store in the center of town or 1 North Main Street or whomever has to all of a sudden erect a special sign because they're in a particular section of town. That's really my concern with the article.
Absolutely not the case. There's no change to any signage laws or bylaws or requirements or regulations that are part of this article whatsoever.
Okay.
Article 20 is wastewater. Any questions on that? 21 is Chief DeFranzo for the fire and police dispatch. Any questions on that?
Oh, I think both chiefs talked about this in their presentation of their budgets, so it looks good to me.
All right, same with 22. 23 is the mitigation of the geese at Kiwanis at the beach to try to offset some of the DPW resources, as well as reduce beach closures and increase the aesthetic of the beach itself. Questions or comments on that one?
Just a quick comment, that just seems very expensive to mitigate a geese problem. Because when you first read it, it just appears to be quite pricey.
Yeah, it's a whole program. We should, again, this might be one of those things, Derek, for a flyer, like a handout, just so people can see what's involved, because it's really like times a day, bringing in border collies to harass the geese every day until they're gone, and then after that it's twice a week, and then it's a week once a week after that. There's some sort of, it's like they don't just leave. You have to basically continue to bother them so that you change their behavior to a point where they're disturbed enough that they don't bother coming back. And it's an ongoing process. Even after the first year, it's something that's going to come back every year. So my guess is that this is going to be an annual cost that comes up. If we want to maintain the cleanliness of the beach, save those DPW resources from having to clean up every single day, this is going to be an ongoing thing. There's a lot more to it as I've researched, because 3 years ago when I talked to Rich Gazorian and Andrew St. George and said, hey, let's get rid of these geese, I thought it was going to be easy, but it's clearly not. Long answer to a simple.
And the $10,000 in there is a placeholder. Andrew St. George had done some research a few years back, as you just referenced, and he had a quote from a company called Geese Peace. We're just updating that quote. Honestly, I think it'll be probably closer to the $7,000 range versus the $10,000. But we put in a high number there just because we were using an old number from 3 years ago.
Okay.
And we'll have that number prior to executing the warrant by the end of the month.
Okay.
25 administrative, 26, perfect. 26 and 27. So 26 is, who put this in, Derek? Are they here? Is someone here to speak to Article 26, the citizens petition?
I am.
Hi, Lynn. Okay, welcome, Ms. Haggerty.
Hi, thank you for having me. So I sent in a presentation to the town manager to present to the Board of Selectmen in regards to the article. Was wondering if I could present that this evening and go through it to explain the article better.
Yeah, how long do you think that will take?
It shouldn't take very long, but I would like to remark the presentation is formatted to be accessible, and as I start the presentation, I'm trying to follow all accessibility guidelines. Therefore, I'm going to read it so that anyone may be viewing or listening to the presentation is part of the accessibility. So it shouldn't take very long.
Yeah, I'm just looking for a ballpark. Are you thinking a few minutes, 20 minutes? I just want to make sure we set people's expectations that are on the phone.
I don't think it'll take more than 15 minutes.
Okay.
There aren't very many slides here. There's maybe 6 slides.
Okay, yeah, let's go through it as quickly as we can, just so that we can keep moving, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's see it.
Derek has it.
Okay, Lynn, I made you a presenter. I didn't realize you wanted me to manage this, but you have to give me a few minutes to try to pull it up. Give me.
And so we also have Article 27 too. Okay. Yeah, I think we can probably then go through this in 5, no more than 10 minutes, right? We are all very familiar with what's here. We want to get people the information. We should absolutely post the presentation on the website so that it's there as well. I don't see why we wouldn't do that. So
Okay, this is, thank you. This is a, just to pull in, I'll clean it up and get you that information. Okay, so this is presented to the Upton Board of Library Trustees on February 22nd. It's an article for the annual town warrant, May 2021, construction of an accessible ramp for the Racine building. Next slide, please. Right, can I? Okay. So this is the Americans with Disability Act, and it guarantees that people with disabilities equal opportunity to participate in all programs, services, activities of state and local government. Accessible standards must be followed for new construction, as well as accommodations. Physical changes to buildings required by January 26, 1995. Next slide, please. History of the ramp request, initial citizens advocacy request for a ramp support funding presented to the library trustees in June 2019. Library trustees sent a formal request to the Board of Selectmen, fall 2019, no action taken. Current status, citizens petition. Next slide, please. This is a picture of, above is the Racine building. The parking lot has a rear door access with stairs that can be replaced by a temporary or permanent ramp structure with room for an accessible route. Can I have the next slide, please? This is the ramp pictured above, superimposed to the rear entrance of the Racine building as the option for providing access into the building. Next slide, please. Justification for the accessible ramp. The library senior center will take over a year to build if it is approved, continuing the delay for access. The Racine building is a town-owned public building and by law must be accessible. The library senior center may not be approved. Next slide, please. Justification for the $45K cost. Ramp estimated in June 2019 at less than $25K based upon, and this is going to be a correction. It was based upon a metal ramping system. So I will edit that. Additional costs for exterior door, threshold, accessible hardware for the door, additional cost not yet estimated, widening the gathering room door, opening to the library hallway, stripe the parking lot. And then it was my understanding that any unused money taken from the general account funding are returned to the general fund. So the next slide, please. I want to acknowledge that the solution will not meet all the accessibility needs to the building. The library, cable TV station, and the Historical Society. So that's the presentation, and I'd like to ask for the selectmen's endorsement of accessibility to this existing facility, the library.
Yeah, right now we're just addressing the warrant, and so I think that we put this on as Article 26 as part of a citizen's petition. Okay. I don't have any comments on it at this point. Certainly we all support accessibility and making buildings accessible throughout the town. There's no question about that. It's a question of timing and prioritization. I haven't seen this in the context of a broader overall plan for the town and where this might sit as a priority. That said, that's not really what we're here to discuss, but Maureen and Steve, if you have any questions for Ms. Haggerty or comments, certainly we should bring them up here regarding this article.
Not at this time, I don't.
I have a quick question, actually. Maybe it's a joint question, really, for Ms. Haggerty and Derek. If the article is to pass, obviously that would put the funding in place. What do you think would be the timetable on when we could accomplish this type of work? And do we think this is something, we're rounding into spring, do you think this is something that we could have, if it passes, was this something that could be accomplished by August or September? Or what do you think that timetable would look like?
I have a question to Derek before to answer it. I think it could very easily be accomplished. It was a metal ramping system, and it was a project of the town. And my question to Derek is, like the other ADA projects that have been done in ramping systems, relative to Kiwanis, will we need a site plan for this? An engineering plan first?
You certainly would need an engineering plan. There's no doubt about that. And I think when you make a great point that this is a good comparison of the ramp over at Kiwanis, which required an engineered plan. It required a site plan review by the planning board. And then after that, we had to put it out to bid. So there's a significant amount of work that has to get done with public construction projects. The $25,000 seems to me like it's more of a placeholder for the total cost of this project. The engineered plans, I believe, for Kiwanis, I believe we're on $10,000 just to engineer those plans. So there's other factors we have to consider with this project. And I did check with our building commissioner, and he did state to me that he would expect at least either an architect set of plans that are stamped or an engineered plans that are stamped as well. So again, all that stuff has to be considered in this project.
Does that answer your question, Steve?
Yeah, I'm just kind of now thinking to myself, I think the Kiwanis Beach ramp was somewhere in the $50,000 to $60,000 cost. So this being significantly shorter, smaller ramp, it would sound like it should be able to be accomplished within the $45,000. Is that what we're thinking?
Is that the number you proposed, Glenn? It says 25
Yes.
on it's 25 on the slide.
No, it's 45.
I think the article is 45. I think the reference on the slide was the initial cost estimate was 25K, I think is what I saw.
Well, that was the initial cost estimate on, that was the initial cost estimate if it had been just a metal ramping system, a metal ramp to the building.
Great.
Which is it?
Any other questions, Lynn?
It's going to require site plan review because it's going to affect the parking for that building as well. So again, there's a lot of other things that would definitely have to be fleshed out with the building department and with the planning board.
Okay.
Anything else?
Very good. So you said you had an edit, Ms. Haggerty, on that. You were going to edit that where it said would. And in the meanwhile, any updates that you have, if you could please just keep the board abreast of the updates. And I guess that's all I have for questions at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, I will have an edited presentation before town meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, great. And I think, again, I think it would be great to get the presentation up on the website so that people have access to it and can see the information. Obviously, some kind of a handout at the town meeting, Lynn, is always helpful, whether it's a Q&A or just a copy of the presentation or something, but we should also get it up on the website for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Article 27 was a citizen's petition. Is there someone here to talk about that? Okay, so let's see, anything else on the warrant? All right.
I
So
guess the only thing I'd say, the warrant looks good. I think the only thing I would say, and it's not specific to the warrant, but we probably at some point should have an open discussion on what we're thinking we'd like to do short-term and long-term with the Racine building. I think it has, personally, I think it has some historical significance. So I think it's something that we've got to carefully consider what its role will be for the townspeople moving forward. And I think, Derek, we had talked, or at one of our previous meetings, the intention is still to have it open for the Upton Historical Society. Is that correct?
I think short term, yeah, the expectation is that Historical Society would continue to be a tenant there. Long term, I don't know what their long term future is going to be in that building. Is that, to your question, is that a building that gets sold to a developer as part of the town center redevelopment project? I think those are all really good questions that have to be answered.
let's definitely put this on a future agenda because, again, to your point, Steve, it's a great question and it's clearly going to come up in the context of the community center conversation, right? People are going to say, what are we going to do with the Racine building? Where are we going to put the Historical Society? If we do anything with it, do we preserve it? Do we not? I know that the Historical Society looked at that building and said it's not there. It's not a target of theirs for historical preservation because it's been changed so much from its original design. Clearly, they would need to come and share that, but that was my guidance that they shared previously. But we should have a thorough conversation about it because I think there's a lot of alternatives, some of which you just outlined, Steve, and we should brainstorm it publicly as a group and solicit other ideas and see what we can come up with as answers to that question that's going to come up at town meeting. So let's put it on an agenda, if not the next one, Derek, depending upon what they're looking like, the next one or two.
Very good.
Do we want to do an approval of the warrant or a motion to accept the warrant as written, or how do we, usually I think we do, when we do article by article, we did it article by article, but I think this time we went through everything. I think the only one, Derek, Steve, that you were dissenting on was the stabilization. Were there any other ones?
I think at this point that would be the only one.
Okay, go ahead, Derek.
I just want to say any vote to approve, just if you could put a disclaimer that this is subject to legal review. Right now, KP Law has the warrant, they're going through it, and they won't change the substance of the articles, but they would just make any modifications based upon their legal review.
Okay.
No, and I guess just to go one step further, I think it'd be nice to get a final look at the reviewed draft of the VFW parking agreement, because there was some other things in there I was a little leery of, so I'd really like to hold off on that article as well. I mean, if you'd like to review and approve the warrant and just hold those two articles out in the short run.
Yep, that would be great.
Yep.
Do you want to make that motion, Steve? And I think that would be great. And then we'll close out those other two next time we meet.
Okay, I'm gonna hold out then Article 7 at this point. Or did you? Okay. I make a motion. Okay.
Yeah.
I would make a motion to approve the special or the annual town meeting warrant as written. For now, I'd like to withhold Article 7 and withhold Article number. I lost it. VFW parking.
11. 7 and 11.
7 and 11. Articles 7 and 11.
11.
11.
That's pending legal review, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is that in the motion?
I was thinking the motion would be that we could review it. Those two articles.
Yes,
But the entire warrant has to be reviewed by town council.
Yes, that is correct, Maureen. I would amend my motion to say the warrant needs to be reviewed. That's pending any changes according to town council.
Okay. Second, Maureen Dwinell.
Brett Simus, aye, unanimous action. And just to clarify, Steve, that motion was to approve the warrant as written with the exception of Article 7 and Article 11B and pending further current or final legal review.
Yep.
Yep, okay.
Yes.
Great. Next up, we have the, this is for you, Derek, the consultant agreement for the town's municipal aggregation program and energy-related services.
Great. So as you recall, at our last meeting, we had representatives from Colonial Power Group who presented the municipal aggregation program. Again, just to recap, this was a program that the town was involved in a couple of years back, and because of increased electricity rates, we decided to withdraw from the program with potential opportunities to take advantage of hopefully better rates in the future. We are hoping to enter into a contract with Colonial Power Group in order to start that public process and then ultimately apply to DPU. So what I'm asking this evening is for the board to consider approving the contract with Colonial Power Group. If approved, we have this document and we can certainly apply your electronic signatures and send that to Colonial Power Group by the end of this week.
Okay. Any questions?
Maureen, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. They would have to change that sentence there under the town manager acting for on behalf of the town assigns these presents in her official capacity. I think it's AM.
That's a good catch. Thank you, Marion.
Comfortable with that, Derek?
We'll make that change.
I had asked a question when Mr. Capobianco was here regarding how many people the last time we entered into this agreement. Did he ever get back to you, Derek, with the question as far as how many people opted out of the program last time we entered into this agreement?
Give me 1 second here. Denise Allen had sent me a message, and she said that there were approximately 100 opt-outs, which she says translates into about 4.2% opt-out percentage, and is great, I guess, compared to others.
Okay.
She said opt-out percentages in the present time are anywhere between 8 to 10%.
Okay. So the residents must have had a good feeling and good participation in the program. So that's good.
Great.
Any other comments? I can make a motion. Make a motion that we authorize Derek to execute the consultant agreement for management of the town's municipal aggregation program and energy-related services. Stephen Battalion, aye.
Second, Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simus, aye. Unanimous action. Next up, we want to talk about reopening the annual town meeting warrant. Derek, do you want to walk us through where we are with this?
Sure. So, as you know, in order to add articles to the warrant, we go through an annual opening and closing period, which we've already gone through. But given that the schools have rendered a $1.4 million assessment to the town of Upton, and as we learned last Wednesday at the joint meeting with the Finance Committee and with the town of Mendon, we will not be able to afford this assessment within the levy. And so The only way to afford this type of assessment would be to place an article on the town meeting warrant for a possible override. So for that purpose, I think it would be important to have a conversation about reopening the warrant for a period of time, anywhere up to 7 days potentially, so that we can include this article. It also is, I think, a fair and equitable way with the community, that if somebody wanted to submit a citizen's petition, they still have that right. So I think a 7-day period would suffice.
And would we open that at some point in the future, or is the timing to do it now, or I think we need to wait for school?
Well, it's something to consider. So we don't have to open it right away. I think you're right. I mean, we can certainly wait to see what the school committee does, and then open it down the road. You could open it today and just keep it open until we learn more of what's going to happen with the school committee. So it's entirely up to you.
Derek, we don't actually have to put a figure on that right now, right? If we opened it now?
The warrant or the article itself?
The article itself, by opening the warrant now, you wouldn't have to put a figure on it until you got something from the school.
Right. We would, we always basically put placeholder articles in there to warn the residents of what's being discussed. And as you know, through deliberation discussions, we oftentimes change the number prior to it being executed for town meeting.
Okay.
And Derek, is there a time period of in the future, if we decided to open it tonight, would we open it for tomorrow, or would we open it for a week from tomorrow? Is there a projected date in the future that we could open it? Just to give me a little extra time maybe to fine tune their number?
Yeah, again, I think you could open it beginning tomorrow and then maybe keep it open for 2 weeks. So that would be the 16th, potentially. I'm just looking at my calendar. So if you opened it on the 3rd and say closed it on the 17th, I know the school department, they are planning to have their certification hearing on the 15th. So we'll have a pretty solid sense of what they're going to do. But I think to Maureen's point, we can include the article, prior to the closing of the warrant, and then we can make any final adjustments before we actually execute the warrant itself.
Mm. I'd be willing. Oh,
I was going to say, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, please.
I was going to say, so Derek, are you suggesting roughly the 3rd through the 17th? Am I hearing those dates correctly?
Yes.
You said 2 weeks from tomorrow. Their hearing's on the 15th.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
Fine.
Brett, do you think those are good dates?
Works for me. Totally. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Maureen, would you like me to motion that?
But yes, you may, Steve.
All right. Make a motion that we open our annual town meeting warrant beginning March 3rd and close it again on March 17th, 2021. Stephen Metellian, aye.
Second, Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Brett Simons, aye. Unanimous action. We did have our town moderator on the phone, and he would like to give us a little bit of context or perspective on the article placement on the special town meeting versus the annual town meeting. So with that brief intro, Mr. Moderator, the floor is yours. You're on mute.
How's
there
that?
You go.
Good.
Great.
I pressed the right mute button. Okay, good. So when you were talking about when to have certain articles at the annual versus the special, it certainly sparked my interest because I had a sense for, oh, this has been talked about a lot in the past. As a general rule, I think you all know, you can do almost anything at an annual that you can do at a special and vice versa. Okay, there's a few things you can't, but for the most part, you can do anything. But as a general rule, long-term historical, things that you tend to do every year tend to be done at the annual town meeting, simply because that's the logical place to do it, because you do it every year. Now, what had happened a few years back, I don't know how many, 5, maybe 10, there was some financial difficulty, so there wasn't enough money to do things at the annual, so they said, oh, well, let's just put it off to the special. Why? Because we knew every single year we'd have a special town meeting. And what was interesting, in the fall, when you guys were talking about maybe not having a special town meeting, I thought to myself, have we ever never had a special town meeting for as long as I've been doing this? And I couldn't think of a year. So having said all that, if it's something you're going to do every year, it's really best to do it at the annual, because that's the logical place to do it. That's what people sort of expect things to happen, okay? And like I say, the reason why some things did get pushed to the fall special town meeting is because we knew we were going to have it, and we might not have had money one year to do certain things, so that's why we did it. And even the big town hall thing, originally that was at the annual town meeting, and at some point it got pushed to the fall. Why? Because we knew we were going to have one in the fall, so why not do it there? So if the goal is, gee, maybe we can go a year without having a fall a fall special town meeting, then you know what? You better make sure you do everything that you're going to have to do every year at the annual. That's just something to keep in mind, okay? So that's all. I just wanted to throw that out there.
No, that makes perfect sense. It's always good and interesting to hear some of the, not only the history, but also some additional perspective on why things are done the way they are. So that's great, both in general, but in particular in Upton. So thank you for that.
Thanks. Okay. Bye, guys. Good job.
See ya. Thank you, sir.
Very good. Thank you, David.
Mr. Town Manager, we're here for your report and updates.
Okay, so not a lot to report today other than the heavy windstorm we had that started last night and then really throughout much of today. And I feel like some of it's timely because we have an article for this year's annual town meeting to potentially appropriate up to $25,000 for added tree work. And when we discussed this last week with the Finance Committee, Chestnut Street became one of the hot button streets that we talked a lot about that needed work. Although, as we mentioned last week, residents of Walnut Street were the ones that really spearheaded this effort to try to get additional dollars. So when we look what happened in the last 24 hours, Chestnut Street was one of the streets that lost power this past 24 hours. South Street and even Maple Ave, both Chestnut Street and South Street, the power has been returned, but here we are almost 24 hours later, and Maple Ave power is still out, and hoping that it'll return to power within the next couple hours, according to most recent report from Chief Bradley. So again, I really think it speaks to the necessity of having to put additional dollars towards this effort so that we can trim back some of the trees that are overhanging our power lines to try to prevent future power outages. And and again, it's timely because it's not much different than what the Tennessee Pipeline is doing in their right of way. So every year they come through and they mow it, but every 15 or so years they told me that they come through that right of way and they trim back the trees so that the trees aren't overhanging their right of way, again, which can pose problems if they don't maintain that. So again, it's timely what happened this evening and yesterday as it relates to some of the warrant articles that we have in front of us. So good job by the police department trying to maintain traffic, and great job by the DPW. Dennis had text me late last night that he already had his forces out there trying to clear the roads of any falling debris. So they're always on call. And the other item I wanted to bring up, in large part because the board as a whole has talked about this, and most recently, Selectman Donnell has brought this to my attention in the context of the community center and some opportunities to bring in additional revenues to help offset the cost of the community center. So I had sent to the board this past week a map of some property that the town owns that should be considered. And one of the pieces of property that we've talked about in the past, which is under the care and custody of the Board of Selectmen as of a couple of years ago, is a 12-acre parcel of land over on Westboro Road. And then most recently, with the efforts of the Treasurer Collector's Office, the town was able to acquire a parcel of land that is over 100 acres off of North Street. So, looking at those parcels of land, their value, their assessed value is in the neighborhood of about $900,000 or thereabouts. So it's something I think the board may want to consider for a potential to bring in increased revenues. In addition to that, because this conversation came up at Town Hall, Sandy had brought to my attention about a parcel of land over on Orchard Street that one of the two parcels was sold through a bid process back in 2014 for $138,000. The other parcel still remains on Orchard Street, again, under the care and custody of the Board of Selectmen, that is currently assessed at about $190,000. So I bring this to the board's attention this evening as a potential discussion point in the future for, again, as I said earlier, potential revenue sources to help subsidize the overall cost of a potential community center. Pending any questions, that's all I have for a report this evening.
Is that, so thank you. That's, it's always great to have the DPW support out there and those crews working hard to make sure that people's lights and water and roads are cleared, working and taken care of. So thank you for that, and thanks to Dennis and his team. With regards to the selling of land around town as a way of offsetting some of the taxpayer impact for the community center, is that something that we could potentially get into the warrant for this annual town meeting, or is that something we would anticipate doing in the future? Would we have to do it now? Would we have to do it later? What's the timing of that work? It feels.
Those are great questions. So the Westboro Road properties are already under the control of the Board of Selectmen. So there's no town meeting action that needs to take place there. That piece of property, if the board chose, could put that piece of property out to bid. You would set a minimum bid price and then, again, execute some type of purchase. That could take place at any time. And same is said for the Orchard Street property as well. That is already under control, and it already had gone through one bidding process back in 2014. The North Street property is a new property acquired through tax title process through the Treasurer Collector's Office. That is under the control of the Treasurer Collector's Office. That property would require an article to go to town meeting requesting authorization to transfer the parcel from the Treasurer Collector's Office to the care and control of the Board of Selectmen office for future disposition purposes. So the big parcel would be the one that would have to go to town meeting.
I mean, this would, so, this is interesting. If we again, we weren't, I don't know that anybody's prepared to talk about this. So is this something that we could talk more about? Obviously, Maureen, Steve, I'll give you guys an opportunity to ask questions or say something here too. Is it, if we put this on the agenda for the next meeting to discuss, so we could do a little bit of research on it, sort of talk with you, Derek, and get some of the details. Could we talk about it at the next meeting, but still get it on the warrant, or could we talk about it now, I guess is my question.
When is our next meeting?
March 16th.
The 16th. So the warrant closes on the 17th.
Would we have enough information, Derek, by then to if we needed to do something to get it in there? And then Steve, obviously, whatever your take is.
Well, I was going to ask Derek, can you get in touch with the Treasurer Collector's Office? I'm sure she has a file on all that property with all the information in it. And I mean, it would be twofold. You'd be subsidizing the community center, plus if they develop it, you're bringing tax money in with the developments. So you're spreading out the tax impact for the citizens.
And you know, the topic of, I'll throw in a quick opinion here, the topic of Westboro Road, that property that's at the very end, and it actually borders the state forest. It's a very nice piece of property. And I think the general, I guess, consensus, not that any of us that are talking are, you know, experts on development, but you would think that that'd be a nice spot for maybe a small subdivision, cul-de-sac, something along those lines. And as we would all recall, we were approached by the Cemetery Commission for that property. And my feeling at that time is it's, you know, a very nice piece of land. I think that's something that we should definitely consider, strongly consider that as a piece of property for development, residential development. And again, this gets all of these topics are kind of come full circle. You know, it gives us an opportunity to take those dollars, put it in free cash in the short run. You know, and there's money that you say, okay, well, that alleviates the tax base. We're not taking taxpayer, well, we are and we aren't. We're not really taking taxpayers' dollars and putting them in stabilization. So, I mean, I think that's, you know, it's certainly something that's important. I would definitely be in favor of bringing this up on the 16th. And the only other thing I would say is the map that we got showing the North Street properties. It'd be nice to see how that property intersects, if at all, with the properties that we bought a few years back on the backside of the Sweet Williams Farm. I don't think that they would be adjacent to one another, but it looked from the mapping that those weren't necessarily along the roadway. So I don't know what access we have to those properties. I guess that would be my only question. Is that something I think we'd want to resolve and really have a very good understanding of that in advance of the 16th.
So it sounds
There's
like
actually 3 parcels.
There was 3, yes.
Yes, and the smaller parcel, I looked at it today on the map, is 3.9 acres. That's got the frontage on North Street.
Okay.
So it'd be great to see sort of not only the maps that you sent, Eric, but maybe some broader contextual maps, because I think a key question here is going to be where these parcels are relative to existing open space, and if that open space is already protected and how much is there, et cetera. So that's one thing, so that we can see for ourselves. The other thing is, I think it would be important for us to get a perspective from the open space and or land stewardship committees. I'm sure that they would err on the side of protecting the land or keeping it as open space. So I'd certainly like to hear that perspective and argument, so that as we're making decisions, we can consider that side of the equation as well. But I'm with you, Steve. At this point, given where we are in our investment cycle and looking to make a significant investment, anything we can do to offset some of that is great. People have talked for years about, you know, we're not in the real estate business. Why are we buying up all this open space? We've got all this state land. So there is a bit of a balance to be struck there. And if we can use some of this land as a resource, a financial resource for the town, you know, sometimes there's a time to do that, and maybe this is one of those times. So we can discuss that on the 16th.
If I can just interject one other thought.
Totally.
Regarding those North Street properties, I don't think that there's really any reason why we would not want to move those under the Board of Selectmen control. I can't really see any particular reason why we'd want to leave those properties. Again, I think this is I remember hearing about those properties probably 1.5 years, 2 years ago. I think we were just getting clear title to them. And I think at that point in time, you know, kind of my thoughts were, there's really no good reason not to bring them under the, you know, the umbrella of the Board of Selectmen. So again, I know it's not a discussion item for tonight, but that would be my, you know, my gut feeling moving forward.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe we can plan on putting that on the warrant regardless of the other properties, just as an administrative note, Steve, to your point, now that the title's clear. So, you know, let's think about that. Let's think about that too, either way, Derek, and then we can get into all these What else on this one? Okay.
The only thing that I would ask the board members send questions that you would like me to do some research on so that I can have everything in front of you for the evening of March 16th.
Okay.
Okay, we can send off some email questions if we have them. And just quickly, Derek, echo your thoughts on what you mentioned about the DPW, the timing of this windstorm, the damage to, South and Chestnut Street. It's interesting. I would encourage my fellow selectmen to just take a ride down South Street. It's kind of amazing how big the tree is that came down and how much damage it did. You'd be very surprised if you can get a look at it before they come in and to, re-erect the poles and cut the rest of the trees up. But you'd be very surprised what came down.
Was it a dead tree or was it a living tree?
I can say the one on Chestnut to me looked like it was alive. Looked to be, fairly healthy tree.
Yeah, I was very surprised when Dennis said that. Like in your mind, these trees you see all these dead trees that are dead from the gypsy moths, that those would be the ones that would be coming down. But he said most of the ones that come down are actually living trees, which is surprising. But it is what it is. So that's the only reason I asked. I'll go.
Good question. I don't blame you for asking.
I'll go take a scoot over there and check it out. So.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. It's a very, old tree, very big around, probably, I would say 30 inches in diameter at least, from what I can see.
Hardwood?
I believe so. It looked like an oak tree to me.
Wow.
There were some residents taking some of the wood that was cut up, trucking it away on tractors and carts, so I had to really pay attention to where I was driving, not so much the tree.
Welcome to Upton. I love it. Awesome. Okay. Anything else?
No.
All right. Very good. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn the meeting. Maureen Dwinell, aye.
Second the motion, Stephen Mattelli and I.
Brett Simus, aye. Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody.